Hi, hello, I'm Adri, and let me tell you why I'm critiquing my own art that, according to my Twitter, is from over a year ago. Oops. Anyway, despite the speed paint video being over a year late, here is why I'm critiquing my own art and why you should do as well. This piece right here took me quite a long time, not because it was so detailed or anything, but because it left me stumped. So some backstory to explain. I started this piece around the time Honkai Star Rail first came out, and as you may or may not know, I really love the Astral Express family. Specifically this trio. They're so silly, I love them so much. So of course I had to draw them. And as most of my ideas are born, this popped into my head at like 1 AM. It was just pink clouds. That's it. But that's the thing, it was quite literally just pink clouds. I didn't know what other elements to add to it, so that kinda led me to give up, or rather move on from this piece. So while the time-lapse plays, let's talk about why I moved on when I was so close to finishing this piece. I knew that the urge to make it perfect would overtake my enjoyment of finishing this piece. I had the tendency to overthink and overcomplicate things when I didn't need to, and honestly, I'm still working on letting go of perfectionism. Anyone else? But anyway, I think the opposite of the term sunk cost fallacy would be a good description here. I didn't want to spend more time working on this knowing I would just be frustrated when I could spend the same amount of time working on a new piece and learning more from that new piece than if I continued like fiddling around and doing details even though I would not be happy with this piece. So that's why I moved on. By making more art, you are allowing yourself to experiment, be creative with it, and grow from your mistakes. In this case, rather than practice makes perfect, it is quantity makes quality. Anyway, I did give up on this piece, but not the idea. I will have to try again later, with new skills and fresh eyes. Now with that being said, onto the critique part of the video. So, what even is a critique? A critique is a detailed analysis and assessment of something. In our case, that something is our own art. Keep in mind that a critique is never just negative feedback, it is both assessing what can be improved and what has been done well. Meaning, it is important to comment on the things you do like from your piece. This is important to keep in mind because some people go on saying something is bad just because it's not to their personal taste or aesthetic. If it's not a critique, then it's probably criticism. You can tell because it's not assessing or helping you in any way. You can choose to ignore those if you wish. But it is also important to remember that you can ignore well-meaning critique if it doesn't align with your piece's vision. Now that we know what a critique is, what makes a good critique? As per the definition, it is essentially an evaluation. You need to be objective and not lean towards your own personal bias. It is also just as important to avoid being too harsh as well. For example, let's say your friend asks you about your opinion on their art. You'd probably want to be helpful while not hurting their feelings. The same courtesy should go to yourself as well. So in my case, while I was working on this, I encountered a bunch of head-tilting problems. First, the composition was tricky, and I don't think I ever got the perspective that I wanted. I was confused with how the stairs would curve in this perspective, and I also didn't plan out the environment beforehand, so the piece felt flat by being so empty. I think Dunhung's pose could have been more dynamic. Like bro's just standing there, zoning out. So I could have added more personality, like him making sure March doesn't fall over, or him sitting by Kalis or something. It just feels a bit off because he's separated from them by the stairs railing. And then finally, the lighting and shading could have been more dynamic. The lighting feels a bit ambiguous, and I think that also stems from the lack of background planning. I think the sun being under the horizon threw me off, so I added lights here and there. but I still felt like the lighting was off, and that's when I decided to leave it and move on, or else I would go insane. Now for what I think was done well. Honestly, I think the sky and clouds, which was my main inspo, came out nicely, especially the moon. It doesn't feel overpowering, and I like how I darkened the edges. It makes it feel more real in the scene. The clouds could have been more structured, admittedly, but I also like this flow they have. Another thing I really like is March. She came out super cute, and I have been using her headshot as a profile pic since I finished, quote-unquote, this piece. I like how her hair is flowing, how the hand with the camera came out, and I think she matches the environment the most. I also want to point out the floor. I used a brick texture, and though I was struggling to find the perspective, once again, I think the outcome was pretty darn cool. I'm gonna keep that in mind for next time, if I ever redo this. And finally, despite the lighting struggle, I do like how the colors came out. It's giving that cozy vibe that I wanted to feel from this piece. So there you have it. So, why should you critique your own art? It can help you develop an eye for detail and an understanding of what you can improve on. You can also learn and identify your strengths and what elements you're doing well. You'll learn to acknowledge that you are on a non-linear journey and that you never regress or become worse at art. You're just taking a different route than the one you were on before, and that is absolutely okay. And honestly, the most fun part, you can improve your older work if you decide to redo it. Which leads me to what I want to do if I want to redraw this. Well, since we've identified my weaknesses and strengths from this piece, I have a list to use for when I ever redraw this piece. I could also use what I learned for new artwork in the future. Though for this, I want to try a different perspective, or rather the perspective that I had in my mind originally, which was a bottom-up view, or kind of like a worm's eye view. Because again, you know, pink clouds. I also want to stage a scene for the background before starting, and maybe use like 3D assets so that I can see the characters in the space they're going to be in more clearly. And lastly, I want to gather reference for the lighting and shading style so that I don't have to freak out about what to do at the coloring stage, which I definitely did, and it was painful. It was so bad. And I think that's it. We're done. Wow. First video of 2024. Wow. My bad. It took me like 1 whole year to put out another video, but that's it for now. I hope you learned something, and I hope you don't feel afraid to make quote-unquote bad art. It is part of the learning process, and remember, in art, quantity makes quality, so go draw some more. Your masterpieces aren't gonna draw themselves. Anyway, bye now.